Hello and welcome to Vikings Territory Breakdown Podcast. I'm Joe Oberle, Vikings senior writer for VikingsTerritory.com and PurplePTSD.com. That's Mark Craig. He's the NFL insider and Vikings writer for the Minnesota Star Tribune. The Minnesota Star Tribune. That's who he's for now. And we need to tip our hats to old Mark Craig. He's the intrepid reporter we were calling him last week, and it bears out. He's the only guy from Minnesota who covered the game last week. So everybody out there that was quoting the Vikings from the locker room, we're probably getting their stuff from Mark Craig. Mark, talk about that.
That's never happened before. Whenever there's been sites or something where people quote things from the game. It's never happened before, Joe. No, it was weird. O'Connell came out, and there were four of us that went and saw the practices. And frankly, I was there to play golf on Friday, which I achieved great heights of my golf, Joe, as you know. And then I stuck around for the game because I was like, I wouldn't mind staying in town a little bit longer. So and O'Connell comes out and he's like, laughing. He's shaking my hand. He goes, "Oh, you're the last standing," or something like that. And I haven't been there was one VEN reporter and then Cleveland AP guy, but I haven't it's been 30 some years since I've stood in front of a coach after a game by myself and was asking questions. So it was weird. It's the nature of what the preseason has become. It's the nature of what the business has become because people don't have people just don't invest the money like they did before in traveling. And the people that did go from like Minnesota media, sort of the air of this game, the air in the balloon was taken out when JJ McCarthy wasn't going to start or play. So I don't know if they changed their flights, but they went home. Frankly, if this had been like Carolina or something, I probably would have been on a plane too. But the game itself, I did see, we take different approaches to covering games and just kind of what did we learn? And I focused on Nick Mullins, obviously, and Caleb Evans kind of saying, hey, Caleb Evans needs to step up. And it turns out he doesn't need to step up because the next morning they signed Stephon Gilmore. So it was a good week in Cleveland. Not a good week for the Browns backups. So I think they lost 3 offensive tackles in that game, got 3 injuries to tackle in that game. Whereas the Vikings, the best news was it came out of that without any injuries.
I don't know. I just find it amazing. I mean, we've all talked about this, the decline of newspapers and traditional mainstream medias and such over the years. And this, to me, it's just another sign of where we're going, where you're going to pick and where you're not, beat writers are not going to be there beating out the coverage of a game. They're going to beat a path home as soon as JJ McCarthy gets hurt. I
don't know what their plans were. I just say that the NFL preseason games have become essentially meaningless. And, there's games during the season where I'll stay at home and do my 5 extra points from home. So it's not like I'm, I personally, where I'm at in my career, I don't want to go to 17 games, travel. Because frankly, the NFL is giving you, there's less and less being given or the ability to get, stuff. And, and frankly, I like when you're home games or when I'm on the road, what wasn't telecast to everyone who has every other. I mean, there's 10 billion people in the world, and 9.9 billion of them have their own website that covers the Vikings, I think. So, but you go in the locker room and you get, having a conversation with Lewis Seen, have a conversation with McGlother and different people like that. It was not your typical media horde that you see now that just gets kind of regurgitated or frankly, there's stuff going on now where if you tweet, something, it gets picked up by a website that you never even heard of. and they report it as something, and then they embellish and really, try to get stuff out there, and it becomes your tweet that is what upsets, someone, either with the team or whatever. So it's like, yeah, it's a different world right now. It's I don't know that it's better.
Sure is. Well, you said it wasn't a meaningless game for people that you mentioned, like Nick Mullins first and Lewis Cine. We'll talk about them both. Let's talk about Nick. He looked good. I need to see more out of him, but I mean, he had a decent game for the time he was given. He looked like he had a command of the offense. He didn't turn the ball over. Good God, he didn't do that, which is what he did like crazy last year. And he looks like a solid backup again if that's the kind of thing that continues. Talk about his performance on Saturday and what you think about Nick Mullins and the whole quarterback situation.
Well, what I focused on and what I led, what I asked O'Connell about was, I said, there was a play in the red zone where, if the diving corner makes the catch, we write it differently. It was a guy that an interception that was probably dropped. I mean, the guy who dove for it, but he should have caught it. And I said, that was bad. But there were two incompletions when he was under pressure, and when Nick Mullins was under pressure, that impressed me, where he throws the ball in the dirt. And I know it's a preseason game, and he might react differently in the regular season. But the thing about this guy is that, as much as he wants to talk about not turning the ball over, he still, in critical situations, will just throw it up for grabs. And O'Connell said, yeah, I agree with the two that you're talking about. But he said, I wanted him to throw that other one away that I mentioned first, where the corner almost intercepted it. So he said, yeah, O'Connell said, yes, this is their only, basically, at Nick's stage of his career and how much they need him. He said, Nick's a much more important player to us now with JJ being out. And he just said that this is something that we have been, harping on, and there's some progress being seen there. Other thing about what I liked is, on third down, the guy was under a heavy pressure the entire half. I mean, he got sacked 3 times on third down. Once by getting beat by the only starter on the field for both teams was Ed Ingram. And Ed, there was a stunt there that Ed should have picked up, and gives up that sack on third down. But they converted 6 of 10 third downs. Mullins completed 5 of 6 to 5 different receivers for 5 first downs, including a 31-yarder to Naylor. It wasn't a third down, but the touchdown to Tristan Jackson is a nice back shoulder throw that only Tristan's going to catch. So yeah, there's a lot to like there. It's again, it's not like it was perfect, but he is your backup. You need him on the team. And I was earlier saying, JJ McCarthy's going to start. Sam Darnold's going to back up. There's no use for Nick Mullins. Well, the league changes on a dime. Every morning you wake up, it can change completely. And it did when JJ McCarthy went out for the year. And Nick Mullins now could be, not only a starter because of injury. Nick Mullins might be a starter because Sam Darnold doesn't get the job done.
Where's that's a hot take. There is a
hot take. I mean, anybody who's been watching Sam Darnold for 6 years knows that he's not. You can't just assume, Sam Darnold's going to come here and be, going to win 8-9 games. I mean, it hasn't been proven anywhere he's been.
They're going to need a Great Wall of China built around Nick Mullins if he's going to be a starter. I will be turnover machine all year. I mean, I still have nightmares about that butt pick that he's on his back in the middle of the line and he throws the ball to the defensive lineman for an interception. I've never seen that in the history of the league, that play. But
well, the thing about him is, when he was in there, they were explosive. I mean, it's. He started 3 games and threw for 1,100 yards in those 3 starts. Of course, 8 interceptions, including 4 when he threw for 411 yards against the Lions. He lost the Lions twice in 3 weeks while throwing for 396 and 411 yards in tight games. they're like, Christian Ponder, people were crying for Christian Ponder to, we need a 300-yard game out of Christian Ponder. Well, they went to Washington one time, got their rear ends handed to them. Christian Ponder threw for 340 yards. It was like, hey, there's your 300-yard game, because it was all sloppy, trying to catch up. These were close games against the Lions that, your quarterback was producing, but he was throwing the ball to the other team. And I think he's also got to be told that he does not have Sam Darnold's arm strength. He does not have Kirk Cousins' arm strength, because he would react and make passes that his arm couldn't, writing checks that his arm couldn't cash.
Yeah. Interesting that you say that about Darnold, because I was just reading a story this morning. I can't remember. It wasn't somebody that was in Cleveland asking questions from you, but it was with you. But it was a story I read that O'Connell was pretty effusive yesterday talking about Mullins, and almost to at least this person's thought was the detriment of Sam Darnold. So I don't know if that's a way to motivate Darnold and say, hey, this guy's moving up right up behind you. You better step up your game, or what's going on there. But it's probably blown out of proportion. It's not true, but O'Connell was saying good things about Mullen, and it's notice to Darnold, I would hope.
Well, yeah, I mean, not saying there's lies at the podium, but they're certainly not going to. Other than Zim coming to the podium in Green Bay and they're saying, do you want to see Kellen Mond? And he says, I see him every day. And I did talk to Zim about that when I was there a couple weeks ago, and he, it's like, I didn't mean it with the way that people took off with it. It was like, whenever people ask me questions, as Zim saying this, is that, we don't practice, or I don't watch practice. He goes, I knew he wasn't ready. And I think, Kellen played 3 plays in that game, and 2 of them were awful. So, but I mean, it's part, O'Connell is not going to stand up there and say, hey, I mean, he has stepped up there and said, obviously after the game on Saturday, and said that, Mullen should have thrown that one ball away that I mentioned first. But yeah, by being a quarterback's coach and everything, you are trying to, keep things positive, especially publicly, about, where these guys, need to get, and what do you focus on the positives. And there were some positives I like about Nick. And, I keep saying, and the reason I thought JJ was going to start week 1 is because this is not a high bar. Sam Darnold is not this high bar that I know everyone knows his name and everything, and he was a former number 3, but there's just there's nothing there to say that, hey, the Vikings, this is the guy, and he's gonna have a Baker Mayfield year. They're gonna extend him for another year or 2 or whatever, or he's gonna go somewhere else. We got to see this before we can believe it.
Oh, it's going to happen. He's going to get the revenge game. First game on the schedule is his 49ers, who let him go. He's going to be all over those guys.
They go to the Giants.
They go to the Giants. I'm sorry. Second game.
Come on, Joe. You're taking them 2 games at a time, Joe. I only take them 1.
Well, the Giants I'm looking past, because they got rid of their quarterback, who the Vikings made a multi-millionaire.
Well, you could make the Giants a revenge game because it's the stadium where he played for the Jets, and
there you go. It's the revenge tour. It's a revenge tour.
I didn't realize that until I saw Bill Musgrave come walking off the field with the Browns, that those practices were Bill Musgrave's revenge practices. I talked, Captain Muskie. He was an interesting guy, and he's a consultant for Stefanski in Cleveland. So,
more quarterback talk. I liked more what I saw from Jaron Allen this week than I did Jaron Hall last week. He looked lost last week against the Raiders, and this week against that tough Cleveland defense, even though it was second string and vanilla defense and preseason game. But he threw for 2 passes for touchdowns and moved the ball well. Jaron looked a little bit more like the guy we saw before he got injured in that one start last year that moved the ball up the field.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good, he gets to make the team now as a third quarterback, and obviously Kevin O'Connell is getting a lesson in the need for having extra quarterbacks around. So, he stays on the team as your number 3. You keep working with him. He had a perfect passer rating, 4 of 5 for like 80 yards and a 71-yard touchdown. And so I just say, how's it feel to be perfect? You reached perfection. He's like, well, he goes, you never reach perfection. And he's still he doesn't really know how to joke with you, but he just still got a lot to work with. And his throw, the touch that he put on the throw, that the receiver Johnson caught, was nice. It was over the top. And another lesson about covering a preseason game for a newspaper, which still has, for now, we're still have a print edition, and we haven't completely surrendered on that. So you still have some deadlines, and you don't get to see a whole lot of second half when you're, especially a preseason game where you got your head down, because you have to file at the buzzer and get down there and do your thing. And so the interception by McGlothern, I just I didn't have a chance to see all of it. And so I'm in the locker room afterwards. I didn't realize he got caught, or how it happened where the quarterback got him. So in the 90-yard return, quarterback tackles him, and I was laughing. I said, "Wait a minute, who got you?" And he said, "The quarterback." And I said, because they were all teasing him, and I was like, "Well," then he said it was Tyler, it was Huntley. Well, I said, "He's not really a quarterback; he's more of an athlete." So it wasn't like Joe Flacco ran him down,
No.
And I like that guy, number 47. And I wrote a thing about it. It was like, who the heck is 47? I said, each year there's always a guy. Keenan McCardle in 1992 in Cleveland was that guy. Who's number 2? Who's number 2? This guy jumping like a deer and catching everything in sight. Well, this McGlothern guy is someone that you go, wow, he just keeps making plays. And I don't know if he gets cut and he ends up on the practice squad, or it's hard. I guess it's hard to picture him being on, making the 53. But man, I would hate to lose that guy. If you think you're going to lose him, if you don't put him on the practice squad, which maybe you don't. But yeah, I'd want to see more of this guy. He just has a way of making plays that sort of like a little bit like a Caleb Evans did as a rookie, and then just has regressed to each time as he's gone through his career.
You need a 53-man roster just for the cornerbacks on this team. And one more question on quarterbacks here. I know it's crucial. You've been waiting to go off on it. The Vikings' new quarterback, Matt Corral, how do you say his name, had in his first drop back resulted in a safety. So it wasn't a great auspicious debut in purple for old Matt. What did you think?
Yeah, it was funny because he wore number 17, same number as the punter, Ryan Wright. So we're sitting in the press box, and there's tumbleweeds going by, and there's all the seats are empty basically, and where the Vikings were sitting, some of the Vikings people had already gone down, and Quasey's sitting over, probably 5 chairs from me, 10 chairs or 5, 6 chairs from me. And the Browns the press box announcer, now at quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings, Ryan Wright. And I looked up, and Quasey starts laughing, and then they before they could correct it, they corrected it, and I said, getting ready to say what's wrong with that Quasey guy putting a punter at the quarterback? He laughed, but so. And the poor guy, he just arrived, and then they had a tryout in Cleveland where they brought multiple quarterbacks in. This is a guy that they had interviewed in 2022, coming into he's a 3rd round pick of the Panthers. So they, we're talking to him. I guess one of the first quarterbacks they interviewed to try and get on day 2 or day 3. So he signed him on Friday. He plays on Saturday. First drop back is he gets sacked, and then they got the ball back, but then I was going, come on, someone take a knee, because the Browns, someone take a knee and get this thing over with. And so they had Matt do the Kevin O'Connell special and kneel down twice, and because I think Kevin did that a few times for Tom Brady in his career, probably where you kneel down and just let's go home,
Yeah, it was probably a good thing at that point. Well, that about.
I do say in adding about this guy is that. Bring him in for that purpose. Jaron Hall got hurt. What are you going to do? How are you going to finish the game? They have not. And I asked him after the game, way too early to ask him, but I said, what are your plans for Philadelphia? And he said, they haven't decided, but my guess would be Jaron Hall starts because you don't want Nick Mullins getting hurt. So Jaron Hall will probably start, and this Matt Corral, whatever, will mop up the second half or maybe even 3/4. Who knows?
I think they should have Ryan Wright actually starting.
Ryan Wright.
Didn't he used to be
up like the Iowa punter? He kind of has that.
Well, he threw a pass. He threw a big play.
That's right. Yeah, he had a big.
I think he's a quarterback at some point. So maybe this PA announcer was onto something. Anyway, that'll cover the quarterback discussion. I think we're gonna have to. We might as well just call it the quarterback segment. We're gonna be talking about these quarterbacks all season long. Every little thing they do right or wrong is going to be prayer or oh god, get rid of them.
We might be talking about more than are there right now. I mean, there might be another rocket scientist in the future coming here. Who knows?
Oh, I saw an article before we got on here from Fansided talking about the Vikings should trade one of their 5th-round picks for Dobbs because he ran in. He made a nice play running, the ball for San Francisco this weekend. Good guy.
I still feel, O'Connell should have gotten more out of him than he did that initial burst. I thought that was a missed opportunity, but
wasn't there a reason there that he just didn't have a handle of the entire offense
he didn't have a handle on the entire offense for 2 weeks, and we were all writing rocket scientist stories and praising, and I personally said that this continues Kevin O'Connell's coach of the year, and then it just went south in a hurry with the Raiders game, I believe, and then Mullins came in, turnovers went crazy, and so. I mean, to me, it was, and the reason that Kevin Stefanski got coach of the year for the second time was that he also had 4 quarterbacks, but they made the playoffs with using 4 starting quarterbacks. Now, in saying that, he caught Flacco in a bottle there and rode that to the playoffs. The Vikings tried to get Flacco, as probably before the Browns, right around that time, and it didn't work out. So. Maybe it could be different if they get Flacco.
Well, if you got a quarterback on your roster who shall remain nameless, that eats up 3/4 of the salary cap, you can't get someone like Flacco. Maybe
Flacco costs less than half what Sam Darnold costs.
Why didn't the Vikings get him then?
That's a good question. That's what I would have done. The Browns didn't bring him back because they didn't want him. They are praying to God, the football gods, that Deshaun Watson doesn't become one of the biggest mistakes in Cleveland Browns history, that they don't want Flacco hanging over his shoulder. So they go out and get someone that makes Watson look good and Jameis Winston. If you want your starting quarterback to look good, get Jameis Winston to throw 100 picks in practice behind him.
Boy, a mistake, the biggest mistake in NFL history at the quarterback. That's a high bar to surface No,
not NFL history. Oh God, probably not even in Browns history. I'm just saying, it'll be, here's how a Clevelander thinks. All right, Joe. Baker Mayfield's going to win the Super Bowl, and Deshaun Watson's never going to do anything, because then you add that to all your other Cleveland things. Where they could have just kept
that's a high bar to get over. You're talking about the mistake at quarterback for Browns. They got a history of them, but so are the Vikings. So
financially, it would lead the way. That's for sure.
All right, let's take a quick break and come back. We'll talk about more that we saw, that Mark saw. He's the only guy that saw it. The only eyes on the.
Was it on TV here? Here?
Yes, it was. So we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about the Browns and Vikings game. Come on back to Vikings Territory Break. Okay, folks, welcome back to Vikings Territory Breakdown with Mark Craig from the Star Tribune, the only reporter out there still just grinding away. When he's not on the golf course, you can find him hunched over his computer, hacking away, asking the questions that everybody can reaggregate for the rest of time. Thank you, Mark.
Except for yesterday. I didn't go out yesterday. I was
Fine. Just break my bubble right there. I build you up and you tear yourself right down. Vikings, Tristan Jackson caught another touchdown pass in the preseason, 2 games. and he looked good doing it. Was this the back shoulder one, or was that the previous one? I can't remember. But he's got to be battling. What's the guy's name? Who's the other neighbors? Or Jalen? Who?
Jalen Naylor, Sid.
Thank you. Good. Yes, that is the truth. I mean, now we got an official battle. You got Justin Jefferson, you got Jordan Addison, who's going to be a question mark throughout the season. He's injured and he's going to be suspended. So you need these two guys battling. I think Tristan Jackson and Jalen Naylor are going to get plenty of time in this offense, and you even got Brandon Powell. What do you think about Jackson and his performance, and where the wide receiver depth is going to land this year?
I think you look at camp and you want to see guys like change the narrative from start of camp till the start of the season. And two guys who have done that. And I thought that Jalen Naylor had it in him. Tristan Jackson is a guy that we've always kind of heard that they like, and he'll get hurt or just not. It's never really materialized. He hasn't been around a long time, but there's been past summers where you're thinking, we like this Tristan Jackson. This year he's putting it on. He's putting it on film. He's putting it out in front of us. So you kind of went into this, preseason, this training camp thinking, it's going to be basically Brandon Powell. It's going to be your number 3, and we'll see what they can do for 4 or whatever. Well, Naylor, I feel, it is I would say probably still is a competition. And even if it like one wins 3, one wins 4 or 5, there's a way to use them all. So I do feel the Vikings fans should feel better about the depth at receiver. I think Naylor is a legitimate NFL receiver that needs to stay healthy, needs opportunities, and the same for Jackson. And then you still have Brandon Powell is probably where he should be, more toward the bottom of your receiver depth chart as opposed to being 3, because whenever either by injury, Addison, I saw him. I didn't have a chance to ask him anything, but he was coming out. He was walking, but he wasn't in a boot or he wasn't like on crutches or anything at the game. So he was walking slow, but they feel like he can be ready for the start of the regular season. And then, who knows what's going to happen with his suspension.
Was this a high ankle sprain? Was that a high ankle sprain? Is that what
I don't, if it was, they labeled it for us because it was basically, it's not serious. It's we are hoping, a couple of weeks for the start of the season. You can't just put, like I've seen, you see on Twitter and everything where they want to know, is he coming back September 3rd or September 4th at noon or September 5th at 8 a.m. Everyone has their own. I mean, Brett Favre would break his neck and be playing 3 days later. Another guy, look at J.J. McCarthy. He has a preseason game, his first in the NFL. He looks fine. Everybody's talking about him, but at some point he tweaks something and he's out for the year. Each body is completely different in how it reacts. Look at Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson redefined what you can do after an injury like that. But not everybody can do that.
I understand, Mark. There's pressure when you're the only guy reporting on stuff. You got to get it all.
Well, I said, I want him back by September 11th. At what time do they play on the first September 8th? Is it
probably noon? I don't know.
So but by inactives, 10:30 Central Time. Is he going to be ready?
Well, I mean, one could say it's, after it has been in seasons past, you'd maybe have a decent guy at the top. You have Stephon Diggs, and they had Adam Thielen, which was a nice receiving core and some parts behind him. And then KJ Osborne became a third guy, and so they've been pretty good. But this looks like if Addison can play, and he's only going to miss 3 games because of the suspension, and that's the end of it. Well, suddenly it's a strength on this team, I think, to receive.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can't, just like we were not doubting, but not talking about them 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. We can't really crown them. They're going to be outstanding players in the regular season. Naylor and Jackson. I think they have the ability to be. KJ Osborne, I thought, was the most underrated player on this team. and going into his contract year, last year, so 22. There's 2 years, I believe, 22 and 21, where he was, especially 20. Well, those 2 years, it was like, man, this guy, man, when they shut down Jefferson and they shut down Thielen, there's a third guy that made him pay consistently. The touchdown in overtime, I think it was, or at the end of the Carolina game. These fourth downs where he's catching the ball point blank for first downs and did great. But then he just disappeared. Well, disappeared in part because although he early in the season when he was with Kirk, he had some didn't play as well as he had
drops.
But then when you're dealing with every other quarterback coming in and out, and that changes things. But Jefferson's going to need Hawkinson. The primary guy that Jefferson needs is Hawkinson.
Yeah.
To find those pockets to where they have to focus on Hawkinson as well as him. Then he needs Aaron Jones. That's probably your number 2 guy that Jefferson needs. Aaron Jones has to make this line better with his speed or his instincts that Madison didn't have. And then you're looking at that, Addison, that's second, third receiver, and Addison's going to be gone probably at some point. So that Naylor has to be a part of this, or Jackson. So yeah, it's all about, how do you, because if they can take out Justin Jefferson, as hard as as great as he is, if you don't have anything else, if you don't have Hawkinson, you don't have a running game, Justin Jefferson is not a magician. He can't do it on his own.
Right. Okay, I buried the leads for this week, and I'm going to talk about them now. I want to talk about the defense. There's a couple of headlines there, and I'll let you attack them in the order you want. We got Lewis Cine having a huge game, and then we have the new cornerback, Stephon Gilmore, signed this week. So which one do you want to talk about first? Let's talk about Lewis. He played pretty well, right? Because did you talk to Lewis Cine after? Yes, you did.
I ended up not, saved him to write, because you have to have something to do in there. You got to keep feeding the beast, So when off day, wrote about. I went up to Lewis Cine and because I paint the scene where I wrote the story. It was you walk up and you see him sitting there, and it looks like someone just ran over his dog, and you're going, that's not how you would anticipate a guy, 10 tackles, a sack, an interception, 2 tackles for losses, but so you say, hey, and O'Connell singled him out first before he mentioned any other players. He singled out Lewis Cine. I thought he had a great game. It was good to see him, like himself, and the guys it's almost to the point where it was like, you felt like almost like you're patting him on the head. Like the compliment is more of a knock than here's a 24-year-old former first-round draft pick who played the entire game, and the fact that you say, oh, he had a great game is kind of like almost insulting. But that's where Lewis Cine is right now. So Lewis Cine's demeanor kind of fit more of the, hey, I'm a 24-year-old guy, former first-round pick. I might not make this team. I just had to play an entire preseason game. Yeah, I had a sack, but the sack came with 4 minutes left in a game where everyone else is on the sideline, with their travel bags. Let's get out of here, So he talked about. He goes, I said, first of all, I said, O'Connell mentioned you, highlighted you. He goes, I said, what'd you think? And he goes, it was a good game.
Is he usually
waiting? And you know how that is. You get those awkward pauses. So you're like, well, how did it get going? He goes, well, it hasn't gone how I thought it would be. I wanted to come out and really cut loose this year, but then I pulled my hamstring. And I don't know if it was mentioned that he had a hamstring. Did they just say soft tissue? I can't remember. But he said, I had a hamstring injury. Then he goes, it's hard to be, to let it loose whenever you're constantly pulling this, yanking that. And then he said, but he did thank O'Connell for letting him work through it, where no pressure to get back on the field. And he goes, then I came out and had to show who I am to basically he had to come and show who he was on Saturday night. And he said, well, we'll go from there. Well, if you look at the situation, that last year they kept 6 safeties because Flores loves safeties. and they can do, they love their versatility as well.
Mm-hmm.
So they rest 4 of them. Their top 4 get rested: Harrison, Cam Bynum, Theo Jackson, and Josh Pellis. So they only play 3 in the game. They played Bobby McCain, who has connections to Flores and signed here this summer, in large part because Flores likes his versatility as a corner/safety. And then you have Jay Ward, who's a draft pick from last year, drafted by the current regime, who has, Flores has been tinkering with his corner safety flexibility all summer. So you got those 3. If they keep 6, you got 3 guys fighting for 2 spots. And for me, it's, Lewis Cine could be that odd guy out, but he's here for one reason, because he was a former number 1 pick. Kwesi already showed by getting rid of Andrew Booth, giving up on him and trading for Dallas as one of their failed draft picks. So, I don't know that they keep him just because he's a former number 1 now. If they like McCain, and they like, McCain also had a pass interference in the end zone, which was a bad play. So, Lewis Cine's right on that bubble. And if I'm him, I'd be like, let me go. Let me go sign somewhere where they want me, where I'm not under the pressure of being Kwesi Adolfo Mensa's first pick, and look at all the other people that, all the things that we say about it, this over and over and over. This guy didn't pick himself 32nd overall. This guy didn't trade 20 spots down and give up on Kyle Hamilton and all pros like that. So if he leaves, I do hope he goes somewhere and turns his career around and has a good career.
Well, it's interesting because he, you talked about the sack, but the other hit on the quarterback he had was, for me, that's who we thought we were getting when they drafted him. He nailed the quarterback who had run out of the pocket and was trying to go for a first down, and he hit him textbook legal hit, and it didn't look like, because the quarterback's helmet flew off, and I thought, how is there no flag on this? And they show it later. He got him right in the arms and the shoulder. It was a perfect tackle, and he depleted him. And that's what we heard about him coming in, that he was this hard-hitting safety, and we've never had a chance to see it. Now, I know it was against second, third string, what have you. Do you feel, is this now a turning point for him, that he can actually still make this team and do something here and get Florida's defense and be able to play, or is he gone? What do you think?
Well, what I would do if indeed those 3 guys are fighting for 2 spots, and if Bobby McCain is that far down, if Bobby McCain is starting, he's a 10-year veteran. If he's starting that game with Lewis Cine, when your top 4 are resting, I would keep Lewis Cine over that, because I would still, after this, performance, you can't read a lot into it, but you have to read something into it. And okay, he's healthy. That'd be primarily, that would be one thing that I would, they put his hamstring to the test, because frankly, it didn't matter to them if he hurt it again.
Yeah.
So, that's just the nature of
64 plays and 13 on special teams. My God.
Yeah, that's just the nature of the business, So they know that if he came out of it okay, that would be enough for me to keep him over Bobby McCain. I know that Bobby McCain has, flexibility and everything, but you also you went out and got Stephon Gilmore, so you're deeper at corner. I would keep him, just because I'd want to see at some point, a little more from him. I mean, his first year, 2 years ago, he played 2 snaps on defense, but that was mostly because he had that ugly leg injury, and also you're testing him to see how that leg is, even 2 years later.
Yeah.
In London, when he hurt that leg, played 2 snaps on defense all year. Then he comes back, he's healthy, but different defense. He doesn't fit what Brian Flores is looking for. He plays 8 snaps on defense, and he has 10 games where he's a healthy and active. So I would not be surprised if he's gone, but if it was me, I probably would, take him as the 5th, safety, and Jay Ward as the 6th safety. And
you wonder if Kwesi and these guys read the newspapers or online or anything, I'm sure they saw how people are talking about Andrew Booth is just going lights out under Mike Zimmer down in Dallas now, and they just traded him away. And that was that was their second overall pick as Kwesi's second pick ever as a GM. And now they trade him away, and he's doing well. Not granted, it's preseason and everything. You have to have that caveat, but you wonder if it gives them pauses. And okay, maybe we better hang on to Lewis Cine.
Well, if it does, you got the wrong guy in the job. If he's basing decisions on reading stuff online, I saw that the headline with the Booth thing, and I read it, but it was I think from the Cowboys. What I saw was the Cowboys team website. So right there, you're taking it with a grain of salt.
Okay.
Or maybe it wasn't a team website, but it was one of the many that cover the Cowboys. So there's probably a lot of fans on that website or whatever, fanboy site.
Yep.
But it led off with how he gave up and I didn't see the games. But it led off with how he gave up a big touchdown or he gave up a big completion, but then he played really well. So it's like, sort of like when Sid would say, yeah, throw out those 2 80-yard touchdowns, and the Vikings won that game. They'd won that game if it wasn't for those 3 80-yard bombs, things like that. So I don't know how. I haven't talked to Zimmer. I'm curious to get his take on Andrew Booth, but clearly they liked. It was just they say that one man's garbage is another man's gold or whatever, and that's how these two teams looked at it. If I was going to release Lewis Cine, I would because there's 31 other teams. There's probably more than one team out there that is still thinking of him as the Georgia guy.
Yeah.
So I would try to, even if I got a 7th round pick, I would say, we're going to cut this guy. Do you want him and not have to go, especially a team that's not high up or in position to get him on waivers? I would say give us a 7th round pick, because when you look at, like Levi Drake, Rodriguez is a 7th round pick. And I think he's going to be one heck of a 7th round pick. I'm not going to start this year, but there's something about this guy. He's got some activity to him that you're like, this guy could play.
Well, if that's the case, if we don't see Lewis Cine play in this game on this last game, then we know they're holding him up because they got on film what they want, and now they're out there shopping him. That's what they're doing. But he'll play.
If he doesn't play, then I'm looking for Joe Oberle to be put in at safety, because someone's got to play the game.
Yeah, that would be a mistake.
But you're right. I mean, if he's not going to make the team, I think he's 24 years old. He's a former number one. He's got, he showed he's healthy on Saturday. That's the biggest thing, is they showed that he could cut it loose. And somebody out there would be willing to give a 7th round pick, I would say.
At least it makes it something worthwhile to watch. Well, Lewis Cine and the wide receivers ate up this segment, so we got to come back and talk about Stephon Gilmore, the newest Viking who's come to town, and see what Mark thinks. Stephon Gilmore, isn't that his name?
Yeah.
Okay.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, exactly. So already Mark's got comments to make. So come on back to Vikings Territory Breakdown, and we'll talk about that. Okay, folks, welcome back to Vikings Territory Breakdown with Mark Craig. Mark, I'm just curious how these things work. And I know you kind of know what's going on, but Stephon Gilmore was picked up by the Vikings. He came in for a visit, I think, while you were in Cleveland, and then he left town. And we were talking last week that, they must not, be anywhere near on the money that they want. And Gilmore wanted more than the Vikings were willing or could give. And then here we are, how many days later, and they sign him. I just wondered, does he go and talk to another team, or, but they signed him for $10 million. And $7 million guaranteed, which is a nice, pretty penny for a 33-year-old cornerback, but a former defensive player of the year, several Pro Bowls, or all pros, I believe. Great player, but does he have anything left? What do you think of this? Were you surprised that they signed him after him leaving town? What are your thoughts?
No, I'm not surprised at all, because when you get to his level, you're 30, you're 33. You're probably you're looking at year to year. You want to pick where you want to go, and you want to pick when you want to go.
Or you pick here?
Well, I'm saying we don't know what his other options are. He's waiting for other people coming, and he's got familiarity with Brian Flores and that defense. I mean, he's 30. He's multiple All-Pro, Defensive Player of the Year in 19, I believe. Won a Super Bowl. Played okay for the Cowboys last year. Played pretty good for the Cowboys. The Cowboys were in a situation, so you could say, well, why wouldn't the Cowboys want him back?
4 teams in 5 years, isn't it?
Right, but the Cowboys, he was fourth in line minimum of guys that they would want to talk about giving money to, because their entire team is top heavy. We got to make him the highest paid at this. We got to make him the highest paid. Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb and Dak.
Yeah.
They're in the same situation with Dak that the Vikings were in with Kirk Cousins, I feel. It's like, how much more money do you throw down that hole?
Right.
But Dak's probably younger. But we don't know if he has anything left. He's got experience, and he's better than what they have. Caleb Evans, to me, in that first drive where he gives up a long pass, 17, 18 yards, and then on fourth down he gives up a 15-yard, fourth and short, he gives up a 15-yard. It wasn't terrible coverage, but he needs to be better in that situation. And like I said, I wrote, Caleb Evans just has to. I mean, I know that they say Shaq Griffin is coming back for week 1, but he's not just going to walk in and be ready to go, I don't think. So, it's like Caleb Evans needs to be better. And we've been saying that, he got benched twice last year, but by Flores. So, the Gilmore thing, with Gilmore, it could be as simple as, I want to go look at another team. I don't want to go to Cleveland and practice and be there for a week. These guys are, they get to kind of pick and choose and decide what they want to do and when they want to come in. Back in the day when training camps were really hard in Cleveland, I mean, every year Clay Matthews would hold out because he didn't want to practice, or Brett Favre. Brett Favre wasn't getting hit in practice, but at the end it was like, I'm not coming till whenever, stuff like that. So it's a good signing. It's one of those where it looks good. You just hope that the guy doesn't come back and immediately pop a hamstring, and then he's done for the year at that age. So they're going to have to get him up to speed, and it helps that he knows Flores and his defense.
Yeah.
But, you got to, and I would assume that he's kept himself in really good shape. So, and he passed that fit. We had a shoulder injury, shoulder surgery, I think, in January. So apparently he's back from that. It's one of those where it's good, but it, would not be surprised if something goes south on it with an injury.
It says to me that despite their quarterback situation and making this move at corner, this team is not tanking. This is not it's not the season that I've called a transition year. They're still trying to win and still trying to compete. I think this is it's not Brett Favre flying in a helicopter, but it's a big move for this defense that really needs help at cornerback. And they're bringing in a big name. Granted, he's older, but and they say he's lost a step, but he still should be good enough, as like you said, better than whatever they got. So it's a huge move.
And I feel like, and you can be embarrassed really quick in this league if you don't have corners. I mean, in 2020, when Zim, when he started off with those rookie corners, and it was bad, and then he lost, he lost Daniil early, and I think he lost Everson later in the year. But starting off with 3 rookie corners, it was trying to piece things together. You can get embarrassed, and then when you lose your pass rush too, then you're really in trouble. So. Yeah, they're looking at this as they can, you don't have to be great to get to the playoffs, and then you don't have to be, great to advance in the playoffs. You just have to be hot, and you got to be like the Packers. When the Vikings beat the Packers in Green Bay, the game where Cousins went down, they humiliated the Packers. I mean, that defense, Jordan Love looked awful. And then 6 weeks later, the Packers had won 6 in a row or whatever it was. Yeah. They storm into the playoffs. They passed the Vikings for that 7th spot, and then they win games. That's what they're looking for, And frankly, if you can reel Darnold in and don't make the turnovers that they made last year, you get Hawkinson back, Jefferson, and you get through your Addison suspension or whatever. The offensive line plays well. They're not dominant in interior, but they play well enough, like they did in 2022. There's a lot of there's experience together. So yeah, they shouldn't say we're the Carolina Panthers of last year. I mean, they still have the ability to scratch out a bunch of wins.
What did you think, speaking of Flores many times here, what did you think of the fact that Tua came out and said that Flores wrecked his development when he was down, and Fitzpatrick kind of backed him up on it when Flores was a head coach in Miami and Tua was a rookie, and he kind of came out and said that he squelched or stunted his development down there. And he's not a good person. And then KOC had to address it yesterday and saying he's got good relationships here. What did you think about all that?
Well, I think it's a cop out on Tua's part. I mean, I think, it's a sign of today's players where, they, if he wasn't coddled the way that he had felt he should have been coddled. Now you're asking if you ask someone younger, you might get a different answer. For me, that's a quarterback, and a defense, sort of like a Zimmer and and Kirk Cousins. Maybe there's you have one who's a defensive guy. He's not going to be in the quarterback room holding his hand all the time. Stunting his growth, I think, would be extremely over. I didn't hear all of what he said.
Those might be my words. I mean, he just said that he didn't develop him, I think, the way that he should have, and because he played Fitzpatrick at the time, and that's my interpretation. So don't quote that directly.
Yeah, I think it's a cop out on anything that Tua felt bad about him, whatever period of time he's talking about. He needs to look at himself as opposed to looking at Brian.
Yeah. Ed, you mentioned it earlier. Ed Ingram was the only starter on the 2 teams to play to suit up and start for that game, and he got beat for a sack. Is this the beginning or the end of the Ed Ingram project? And Dalton Risner is going to be your starting right guard.
Well, Dalton Risner has been. We haven't seen him on the field in 2 weeks. I mean, right. This assumption that Dalton Risner is going to play. I mean, Dalton Risner's not available right now. I don't know that Ed has reached the point where you get rid of him because and the guy that I like is that Tyrese Robinson. I wrote about him after the Raiders game. I watched him play, kept an eye on him throughout the game, and I like how he played. And I didn't have a chance to watch him as closely in the Cleveland game, but he started at left guard when Ed started at right guard. I mean, he was the guy that against the Raiders, he came in for Ed on the 3rd series and played the whole rest of the game. And then against Cleveland, he started at left guard, and then he replaced Ed Ingram after early in the game at right guard. So, I know that all the projections I've seen have Tyrese Robinson getting cut with all these other no names, but I sort of like him, and I'm wondering. We're not seeing Dalton Risner, and if there's something going on with him physically, or, do we see him not make the team? I don't know. I would think not, because you're still playing Ed, Ingram in your 2nd preseason game when you're playing no one else. I don't think that Ed Ingram gets cut. No, I think that I don't think they're strong enough or deep enough that you can just throw him away. But I think it could be more of a trying to light a fire onto him a little bit more, because some of these other guys seem to play with a little more. Dalton Risner plays with that fire, that like kind of a nasty side. I don't ever really see that from Ed Ingram.
I got to question your abilities for reporting. Last week, you told us that the Cleveland Browns in practice were kicking the Vikings' butt, but the Vikings just manhandled them on Saturday. What the hell, Mark? I mean, what happened to your Brownies? They aren't as good.
Yeah, the team that was kicking the butt kickers and the butt kickies were all standing on the sideline, Joe.
So what's going to happen on Saturday against the Eagles? I mean, who are we going to see? Who's going to play?
I'm not going to Philadelphia. I know that. That's you want to play golf Saturday morning?
Yeah, maybe.
No, it's wow. I mean, it's going to be. I guess if you and to see him play, yeah, I don't think anyone. Stephon Gilmore isn't going to play. Stephon Gilmore would probably part of his deal was you're not playing me on Saturday, right? So yeah, you're not going to see anybody of note, and then it's like, and then you get to the next week, and it's like finally you get to see Justin Jefferson again. You get to see Aaron Jones, maybe even who knows. I don't know that you'll see Hawkinson week 1, but seeing him work out and moving on the sidelines makes me think that they don't want to have him. They don't want to put him on PUP and have him miss those first 4 games.
Right.
I think that's too many for him to miss, and he's good enough that you would carry, even if he plays just one of those 4 games. I think he's good enough that you say, okay, let's keep him on the active roster, so we're not losing for a month of the year from him.
But if they put him on PUP, doesn't that free up a roster spot for somebody else that they can still evaluate in those first 4 games?
Well, yeah, but then you lose the ability to play him in the 3rd game or the 4th game. I think he's that important to them, and to a quarterback. He was important to Kirk Cousins. Think about how much more important he is to a quarterback who's not as well versed in this offense or as accurate as Kirk was. That tight end, that ability to find those holes. There's nothing that makes a quarterback. There's nothing that makes the chains move quicker than having that tight end that can just.
I got to differ with you. I think they'll put him on the pup because he's more important to their future in playing with J.J. McCarthy than he is this season.
Well, what I'm saying is that based on how he looks and how he's running and how he's going, I think he's farther along. I mean, yeah, you're 100% right. If there's any indication that he's not ready, that he won't be ready for a month, then yeah, you put him on PUP. But if you're saying, he's right there, he just needs to practice, then I practice him, and if I don't feel that he makes the next step, then I let those 4 games pass. But I think what is on the table is the option of them saying he can be back before 4 games is up, and that's good enough to say if there's a chance.
Yeah.
Because that's
and you don't play him for the first couple of games. You play him maybe 2 games in.
Yeah, like I said, whether he goes on PUP or he doesn't, I don't see him playing week 1 because they're going to want to see him in practice. He's not,
I just think they'll go conservative, just like they did with Justin Jefferson last year. I think they'll put him on there, and they've got so many decisions and so many bodies to make decisions on. This gives them a little more leeway to make those decisions. But that's one thing we'll have to.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm saying what's on the table is the possibility. Whereas if you don't see what he's doing off to the side or how hard he's working on the side, it's like you just assume, well, yeah, he's automatically going on PUP because he had the injury in December, and you tick off the months and everything. But I'm saying that it very well could be that they do. They side of caution. You wait those games, and then what I said going into camp was, week 5 is I believe London, and then there's a bye week, and then they come back and play the Lions. So I was saying, don't be surprised if you don't see them till week 7.
Wow, that's true. That is true. Well, I'll have to take the word of the intrepid reporter, the embed, the only guy embed in Cleveland. Too bad they play their 17 games in Cleveland. Then
maybe I'll be the only reporter on playing Inverwood on Saturday morning before the game, or no one beating Joe Oberle.
If you ever played a different course I'd join you, for crying out loud. And if you ever played at any other time other than 6:30 a.m., good God.
What are you, a teenager?
Yes.
Can't get up?
I wish I was. Anyway, that should do it this week for Vikings Territory Breakdown. Thanks, Mark Craig. Hit them long and straight. I know you played well last week in Cleveland. You always do. It's like we need an in-bed reporter telling me how many foot wedges that you use down there. No, I know you don't do that. I'm just kidding. But anyway, thank you. Thanks, Mike Woldham, for producing. Thanks, Joe Johnson, and thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll come back next week and we'll talk about this Philadelphia game. We get you primed for the regular season. So see you next week. And until then, Skol, baby.
Skol.